John 3:20. Omnis enim qui mala agit, odit lucem et non venit ad lucem, ut non arguantur opera eius. For everybody who does evil, who does wicked things, hates the light, and does not come to the light in order that his deeds may not be disclosed or divulged. Here now, John the Evangelist is winding up his commentary, as it were, on the discourse of Jesus and Nicodemus about the significance of Jesus and his mission. Or if you like, if we want to continue the quotation of Jesus, which some interpreters do, Jesus himself is waxing towards the end of his discourse here. We've just heard in the last verse that people love the darkness rather than the light. And here a reason is given to us as introduced by the word enim, which here, as in many other places, corresponds to Greek gar, giving an explanation for something that we've said earlier, for or to be sure, something like that. One thing to note about enim, this frequently comes up in my Latin classes at Boys College. Why enim and not another word? And there are many that mean similar things in Latin. And how do we distinguish between them? Well, one of the things that sets enim apart is that it virtually never appears at the beginning of a sentence. And this is worth paying attention to. We've said many times, and no doubt you know from your own studies, that Latin word order is far more flexible than English word order, but that doesn't mean that there are no rules at all, and it doesn't mean that there were no conventions in terms of how people typically wrote or spoke in a given period. So enim almost never appears at the beginning of a sentence. We can't say totally never because, as always, you can find an exception somewhere. Latin was spoken and written for such a long period and by so many different people that you can always find an exception to virtually every rule. But in general, enim appears as the second or sometimes the third element in a sentence, but never right at the beginning. So who is the subject of our sentence? Everyone, everybody. Remember, we've talked about how adjectives can be used in a substantive way, that is, without any noun that they're modifying specifically, and we can understand from context that omnis means every what? Every human being, every person. Every person who, qui, mala agit. Here is another substantive. Bad or wicked what? Well, wicked things. That is, this is a general term for wicked deeds. Whoever does those, and here agit is functioning simply as a synonym for facit or some such word. Whoever does those evil things, odit lucem. This is a word worth pausing over and talking a little bit about. What are the principal parts that we need to remember for odit? Odi, odisse. That's it. Odi is one of these words in Latin, and there are a few others that we will meet by and by, which appears only in the perfect and pluperfect tenses. Or put in other terms, anytime we see it, even though it may have a present tense meaning, it never has present tense forms. So these are all the forms that you need to know for odi, odissa. Another curiosity is that we don't find it, generally speaking, aside from a few rare exceptions, in the passive voice. When Romans wished to indicate that someone was hated using the passive voice, they either used a different word or they used the expression odio esse, that is to be a source or cause of hatred for others. We don't need to worry about that right now, of course. Odi odisse, when we see it in the perfect tense, as here, odit, ought to be translated and understood as a present tense verb. Whoever hates now the light, and so forth. So if we use perfect forms of the verb to indicate the present tense, what do we do if we want to indicate past time? That is the perfect or pluperfect sense. Well, in the case of this verb, we use the pluperfects to indicate what normally is indicated by the perfect tense with a verb. That is, it's as though all the forms of the verb, as far as tense is concerned, are sort of shifted back one level into time. For everyone who does wicked things, hates the light, and does not come, present tense, to the light. And now we get a purpose clause. In order that what? As usual, ut is our signifier that an interesting, probably subjunctive subordinate clause is coming, and in fact, that's what we find. Arguo, arguere, a third conjugation verb, in the subjunctive becomes arguantur. And remember our handy-dandy little mnemonic device for remembering how the subjunctive forms work in the present tense? We fear a liar, where each of these corresponds to a verb conjugation and its typical vowel pattern, again, for those present tense subjunctives. Here we've got third conjugation verb, is what we find, and there it is. In order that his deeds, opera eus, and remember that opera is neuter plural from opus, a neuter noun of the third declension. His deeds, the things that he does, his works, we might say in biblical language, in order that his deeds, arguantur, might not be made manifest or disclosed or divulged. And this is a word that corresponds, as in many English translations, to something like exposed. That is, divulged in a negative sense, something that you would rather keep hidden, which of course is the theme of this verse, that mankind loves the darkness because the darkness will cover over and mask the wicked things that people do.